Thank you, Carolyn and Kevin, for the beautiful music during the prelude. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Staten Island's service on the eighth principle. We'll be exploring the meaning of the eighth principle today on this beautiful Sunday, February 27th, 2022. I have a few announcements. We're grateful that you have joined us for this virtual service. Next week, we will be offering a multi-platform service. You can choose to attend in person or to join via Zoom. Masking and social distancing will still be required for the in-person service. There'll be no singing except for the choir, and everyone will still be encouraged to stay seated in the sanctuary and to gather in the parish hall for conversation, sans, coffee, and food. During today's service, all music will be performed by Carolyn Clark and the choir. After service, everyone is invited to join our virtual coffeeless coffee hour. And now, acknowledging that the world has changed drastically since we were last together, Sally Jones will offer a call for peace.
War is a tragedy, a crime, a defeat. Peace-loving people around the world condemn the decision to abandon paths of diplomacy with war in Ukraine. These actions violate international law and fuel a dangerous escalation of violence. We urge all parties to cease hostilities, de-escalate. Our hearts go out to the people of Ukraine and all people caught up in the violence of war. In response to the shock of the attack on Ukraine, Bruce Knotts, director of the UU office at the United Nations, raised up the work of John Peters Humphrey, who drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the request of Eleanor Roosevelt, which was adopted by the United Nations in 1948. In a talk in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada, Bruce discovered that John Peters Humphrey was a Unitarian, and there are echoes of the UU's 7 principles in his words. You can hear them in the preamble. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. Whereas it is essential, if humankind is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Whereas it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations. As we work towards adopting a new 8th principle of our UU faith today, we hold these words in our hearts as we cry out, as we appeal, as we take action for an immediate end to the violence in Ukraine and to war zones around the world, to the revival of diplomacy, and for humanitarian aid to the victims. We know we have much to do to heal ourselves and our planet.
Thank you, Sally. As I said, in today's service, we will examine the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism together. I'll read the text, which also will appear on your screen. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. By examination of the principle, our examination of the principle will be presented today in two parts by members of the congregation who have answered a series of questions about the need for and the meaning of the eighth principle. Virginia Allen will now provide the opening words for today's service. Unity is Community by Katie Brum.
Katie Brum uses her poetry to highlight her traumatic life experience. Unity is community. In our communities, it is all about seeking positive opportunities. Opportunities which can also be a solution to our revolution. Revolution, a drastic change in the way we think and behave. We can behave where we can engage in our world's history. To make a switch to enrich the minds of young ones, to show it is about going for your goal and hitting a home run. And that life doesn't have to be living by a gun. But to make a change, we have to look within our hearts. And in our hearts is filled in the missing parts. Then once that happens, helping ourselves and others can start. But like I said, it is all about positive opportunity and bringing the community together in unity. Because without unity, there is no community.
Thank you, Virginia. Please join me in saying the chalice lighting while I light the chalice. In the search for truth and the spirit of love, we unite for worship and fellowship. As an extension of lighting our chalice, we will take a moment to light, metaphorically, a candle in memory and recognition of those who have been affected by police brutality, knowing that we cannot say all of the names of those affected. And these are names we know well, but that need to be said. We light a candle for the life of Trayvon Martin, who would have been 27 years old this month. We light a candle for the life of Ahmaud Arbery. We light a candle for the life of Dante Wright. We light a candle for the life of Amir Locke. May this light be a symbol of our commitment to continue the work of racial justice and to proclaim Black Lives Matter. Our opening hymn today is Filled with Loving Kindness.
May with loving kindness. May I be well, may I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Thank you, Kevin. This is the time in the service when you are invited to share your joys and sorrows. This is also the time when you can introduce yourself if you're new to the congregation. Note that you can raise your hand so that you can be called on to speak, or you can put words into the chat that will be read by Sally Jones. And Sally, I'm assuming you're going to call on people too.
I can do that. You can, if you wave your hand or put that little reaction hand up, or just unmute yourself and jump in. I'll look for joys and sorrows in the chat too. It takes a little while to type them, I know. Okay, Suzanne, go ahead.
Two things. John and I got to see 6 of our many grandchildren yesterday. They all came over for lunch, and we haven't seen them since before Christmas because John was having heart surgery 2 days after Christmas. And then the second thing, John will be going in for another heart surgery a week from Tuesday. So wish him luck. Hopefully it's the last heart surgery he will have to have. And not die on me. No dying on me, John.
We know he'll do well. We wish you well. Okay, I'm looking for, you can just, oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say that I visited Larry on Friday, and I know Viv has gone to visit him a couple times. He's about to have some balloons, angioplasty in his leg on Monday at Staten Island Hospital, and he's receiving visitors. And I think Kathy has sent out his phone number. He now has his cell phone charger, so he can be reached by cell as well. He's in good spirits. He looks good, and I'm sure he'd love to have visits and calls.
All right. Barry, go ahead.
A joy that my daughter got her choice of job for the summer. She'll be working at Unirondack, which is the UU camp, summer camp in the Adirondacks. And so she'll be coming back in May to go do that. So it's a joy for me.
Anyone else? Oh, Bonnie, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I just wanted to express my dismay and sadness that Staten Island Pride was once again denied. I'm sorry, I'm holding back tears. Marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade, which I find just an abomination, but
Truly is. I think I see Christine.
Yeah, hi. Just jumping on Bonnie's comment, and thank you, Bonnie. I'll just take a moment to let folks know that if you want to stand in solidarity with the Pride Center on March 6th at the St. Patrick's Day Parade, just head out to the Forest Avenue site. There will be folks already there up and down the parade handing out both rainbow flags and Irish flags and standing in solidarity. And we did it 2 years ago. And just the overwhelming support from folks passing by, taking flags, was just, it really tells the tale of where Staten Island is on this particular subject. So if you're so inclined, I would encourage people to come on out to the parade, walk along the parade. Trust me, you'll run into somebody who'll be happy to give you a flag and find a spot. The intention is for everybody to be, every corner to have somebody from Pride Center and the volunteers and supporters. So thanks for mentioning, Bonnie, and hopefully folks can come out.
Oh, Kate, sorry, I missed your hand before. Go ahead.
Yeah, and as most people know, I'm in Eggers Nursing Home right now. I've been where Larry is, and I've been promoted to the nursing home for short-term rehabilitation. And I just want to thank everybody for calling and showing how much that they care, and that it really has helped me. I don't know how much longer I'll be here. I suspect until the insurance runs out, which is true. I'm feeling better than I had, but there's still a long way to go. My legs are swollen like crazy, and there's apathy and when you get pains in your legs and your feet, and just, from your nerves, that happens quite. What is it?
Neuropathy.
That's right, neuropathy. There's neuropathy in the legs, and so right now I'm really not walking by myself, which is kind of like, I have a diaper, which is demoralizing, really, and everybody is very nice about it. And I have to be hoisted out of bed onto a wheelchair in order to get around. I do go to physical therapy, and they get me up and they make me walk a couple of feet, whatever. And they keep telling me, oh, you're doing better, but I don't feel like I'm doing that much better. I wanted to go a lot faster. So, but I want to thank everybody for their calls and their good wishes. And that's about it. Okay.
It's so great that you could talk to us from
isn't
the
this
center. Yeah, it's just like a miracle.
I mean, there's an old Swedish saying that nothing is so bad that something good doesn't come out of it. And these virtual, meetings are wonderful for somebody like me who can't get out. Otherwise, I'd be just sitting here thinking about how people are getting together at the church. And now I'm really part of it, so that's good. And I
Well,
appreciate
just remember, one door opens, another one closes.
Yeah,
Or
this
maybe
is
it's the other way
true.
around.
Yeah. Or maybe a window opens.
Yeah.
That's the window. Did anyone else have their hand up, or let me check the chat. I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. All right. So back to you, Sarah.
I think Suzanne wanted to say something.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject when I'm thinking about it, but I just want everybody to know how much I think of Kate Nielsen. She was an IRS agent. And I have such memories because she helped us so much with our financial statements and planning and with our Jolly Holly Fair. And so I just wanted to thank Kate. You're my memories.
Finally, I'm muting myself. Thank you very much. The only thing I will take credit, I found there was money on the unclaimed funds. And I remember they didn't want to do it. Oh, it's not worth it. And I finally pushed them to do it. And we got like $5,300. I said, that wasn't bad for 3 stamps. That's one of the things I do remember. So, but thank you. It broke my heart when I had to give up the job, but I couldn't walk up to the 2nd floor anymore. So it was a problem. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing. We're now moving on to the reading for today's service. Virginia Allen will read A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde.
Virginia, unmute yourself.
Sorry. A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edge of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going, in the hours between dawn, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who are imprinted with fear, like the faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. By this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hope to silence us, for all of us, this instant and this triumph. We were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid. It might not remain when the sun sets. We are afraid. It might not rise in the morning when our stomachs are full and we are afraid of indignation. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid. We may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid. Love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid. Love will never return. But when we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard, nor welcome. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
The first part of today's presentation will provide the answer to 3 questions. What are the origins of the 8th principle, which I will tackle? Why now, which will be addressed by Mary Hernandez, and why the UUA in USA, which will be addressed by Sally Jones. So part 1, what is the origin of the 8th principle? Paula Cole Jones, who's the director of racial and social justice for the Joseph Priestley district of the UUA, saw 2 different paradigms in UU circles over 15 years of discussions on the UU 7 principles and the concept of beloved community, which is deep multiculturalism. And she realized that one can be a good UU and follow the 7 principles without dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. The backdrop to her realization was that UUs and the UUA have done some very good work in fighting racism. During the Civil Rights Movement and in the 1990s, passing a resolution in 1997 at General Assembly to become an anti-racist anti-oppression, multicultural organization, but the funding and the support started to wane in the 2000s. And as a general matter, UUs have a very mixed record historically in other areas of racial justice. To address that for people identified as white, it is too easy to ignore the systems of racism in our society and to ignore the need to decenter whiteness and other dominant cultures in UUism. Paula Cole-Jones worked with Bruce Potlack Johnson, the minister of the UU Church of the Restoration in Philadelphia, and a group of anti-racist activists to develop a draft 8th principle, which Bruce's church then adopted in 2017. He and Paula Cole then requested that the UUA adopt it too. And that process has been ongoing since 2016. As required by the UUA bylaws, a study commission was created in 2020, and that study commission will report on the 8th principle work at the General Assembly in 2023. Mary?
Sorry. Why now? Since its founding by abolitionists in 1862, the Unitarian Church of Staten Island has stood out as a congregation that worked against racism. Through the course of the last 160 years, members of this congregation have participated in innumerable individual and collective actions to dismantle racism, demonstrations, community and congregational educational events, and activities of self-reflection that we have organized and hosted and that we have collaborated on with innumerable other churches, community groups, and organizations. Our official declaration of support for Black Lives Matter in 2016 built on that history and began a conscious effort to educate ourselves through our Black Lives Matter book readings and discussions and educational forums as to how racism has been embedded in our own societal institutions, the framework of our laws and legal structures, and regrettably, our own Unitarian Universalist Association and congregations. As Sally described, in 2017, Sarah described it, the UUA went through a crisis related to inclusive hiring practices, especially related to whites being hired over highly qualified Latinx candidates, resulting in the resignation of the UUA president. In response to this crisis, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, known as BLUE, and diverse revolutionary UU ministries, known as DRUM, endorsed the 8th principle. BLUE's main point is that the UUA voted in 1997 at the General Assembly to commit to intentionally becoming an institution that examines and reports on anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multicultural activities on the congregational and cluster level. By reporting these activities each year, congregations can begin to see progress on their what's become known as ARA-OMC path, as well as hold themselves accountable to vision and goals from one year to the next. Initially, good progress is made, as Sarah described, but the 2017 hiring crisis was not surprising in light of the decreasing support and lost focus. BLUE is holding all of the UUA accountable to this commitment. The white supremacy teach-in in 2017 included BLUE's endorsement of the 8th principle with their resources for planning for the teach-in. As you may recall, our congregation held a service based on those resources, which focused on disrupting the normal to examine where racism exists in our own congregation, and everything from practices such as our hymns to our routines that reflect embedded white supremacy. UU funding and focus in the last decade shifted towards shallow diversity rather than deep multicultural beloved community and structural change. UU supported the movement for Black Lives has been encouraging. The best way for us to truly support racial justice in a significant way is to purge ourselves and our institutions of the culture and exclusive practices of whiteness and white supremacy. The new Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and criminal justice system replacing the older systems of slavery and Jim Crow laws, police violence against people of color, the nationwide efforts to dismantle voting rights and affirmative action, and the January 6th insurrection and continuing nationwide support for Donald Trump, who together with his advisors and associates openly supported white supremacists and continues to support them, show that the country has and is moving quickly and dangerously in the wrong direction. UUs need to take leadership to reverse these trends. We are heartened by the outpouring of demonstrations for Black Lives this past summer, in which numbers of members of our congregation participated locally. It made the Black Lives Matter movement the biggest movement in US history. But while we as UUs have long been showing up for racial justice, we recognize a backlash to those efforts and the growing polarization of our nation and Staten Island. And we know the work is far from over. Our UU principles are designed to be dynamic. As new truths have emerged, the UU principles have evolved. They were revised in 1985 and amended in 1995. This living tradition means that as we get to a new level of understanding and clarity, we can reflect that by changing existing principles or adding new ones, This happened when environmental awareness resulted in the addition of the 7th principle. We also recognize that climate justice and racial justice are integrally intertwined. Our communities of color in the US have borne the brunt of environmental racism and suffer the consequences. People of color are more likely to die of environmental causes, and more than half the people who live close to hazardous waste are people of color. With 10 years left to dramatically curb carbon emissions, this decade is all about fighting for the world we deserve, a world that honors the lives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. There is no climate justice without the dismantling of white supremacy. One way for our congregation to honor that is to adopt and uplift the proposed 8th principle. Congregations across the country began adopting the principle in 2017. As of December 2021, 141 congregations nationwide had already adopted it. It's time we got on board that train. At the last GA, there was talk about having the 8th principle becoming the preamble to the overall principles. But while it's being discussed at each GA, we are a bit away from a vote. That's why congregations were encouraged to pass their own 8th principle, while the UUA goes through the required, somewhat time-consuming democratic process of review, discussion, and introducing a bylaw revision. Dismantling racism is an ongoing process. Endorsing the 8th principle is one piece of sustained action that we can take now.
Why is dedicating to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions particularly relevant to congregations in the USA? The answer lies in the history of this denomination. Whether we have been UUs for a lifetime or UUs for a short time or a relatively short time like myself, we need to know our history. I joined the Unitarian Church of Staten Island in around 2009 without much knowledge about that history, but I was intrigued and attracted by the progressive history of this particular church, founded by abolitionists in 1852, and a place that welcomed peace activists over the years, and was the founding home of Peace Action of Staten Island in 2002. This was a place that welcomed believers and non-believers alike. But I recognize that any institution created by settler colonialists in North America has to be steeped in the racism on which this country was founded. How could it escape it? And our denomination is the merger of two denominations, both founded after the American Revolution and during the height of slavery. The Universalist Church of America was founded in 1793, and the American Unitarian Association was founded in 1825. They merged in 1961 to become what we know as the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association. How many UUs were slaveholders, I wonder? How many were part of institutions that benefited from the slave system or owned stock in those institutions? What was the history of UUs with respect to the genocide of Native Americans? What was the history of UUs with respect to the eugenics movement that promoted birth control for people of color? Surely, there is a lot to learn about that history that will tell us a lot about ourselves. It was a white-dominated institution, so we can infer that white privilege of members benefited many, and it still does. We have much to be proud of in that history: the support of the abolition movement, the support of the civil rights movement, the support of the Black Lives Matter movement. But within our own community, we may just be starting to learn from each other who we are, where we came from, how we got here, and where we are going. And the more we learn, the freer we are going to be. What is that biblical saying? The truth shall make us free.
Now is the time in our order of service when we take an offering. We know it is the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and gather. Links and instructions about giving will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check, or you can donate to our PayPal giving page. Please give as generously as you can. Your offering will be gratefully received. And now we will hear from Carolyn Clark and the choir, and the song, I believe, A Place at the Table.
For everyone born, a place at the table. For everyone born, clean water and bread, a shelter, a space, a safe place for growing. For everyone born, a star overhead. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy. For young and for old, a place at the table, a voice to be heard, a part in the song, the hands of the child in hands that are recalled. For young and for old, the right to belong. For everyone without fear, and simply to work, to speak out, to witness, to worship, for everyone born, the right to be free. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion of peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, creators of justice, creators of joy.
Thank you. We've come to part 2 of the service presentation. John Walker will answer the question, why single out racism? Jennifer Hyman will answer, what is beloved community? Bonnie Phillip will tell us what it means to be accountable. And I will end the presentation by talking quickly about the process for affirming the 8th principle by the congregation. John?
Why single out racism? The UUA has done well with women becoming ministers and leaders. The 7 principles themselves came out of the women's movement within UUism. The LGBTQIA+ community is well represented as members, ministers, RE staff, and other leadership and individual congregations and the UUA, and the Welcoming Congregation program has been very effective. We could probably use something similar for racism. Some congregations have done a good job of making sure they are accessible to people with disabilities, although many UU spaces are still not fully acceptable. Wait a minute. Could you hear me? Okay. The UUA, the US, and the world have also have a lot of problems deeply based in economic class oppression. As Martin Luther King realized, in addition to militarism and materialism, this principle includes that, but is not highlighting it. At a global level, this would not necessarily make sense. But in the USA, racism stands out. The 2 worst crises of the UUA, late in the 1960s and now, were both related to race. Racism in the US stems from chattel slavery, where people were uniquely legally treated as property that could be inherited for something, skin color, they had no control over. And on a personal note, when I was in my sophomore year in high school, a new high school opened and the redistricting resulted in the population of my school going from 80% white and 20% Black to 20% white and 80% Black. I played football and saw the same change on the football team. I was lucky in that the new team members became my brothers and we were a team. I began to realize that Blacks are the same as all other humans. They are human beings. After being drafted into the US Marines, I was sent to Vietnam as a radio operator for the 12th Marine Regiment, which was artillery. One night we set up an ambush in the DMZ with a team of infantry. As I was sitting there, I felt my head being pulled back by my helmet, the strap of my helmet, and I saw a machete coming at my throat. The machete suddenly jerked away from my neck by the hand of Big Stu, a Black US Marine machine gunner from Philadelphia. He saved my life. I thanked him and he said, "No big deal, you connect us to the rear." He died in an attack on our base camp at Jiu Len, Vietnam, the next week. I think of him every time I see someone or myself treating a Black person as something other than another human being. He saved my life. 50 some years later, I still find myself thinking racist thoughts from time to time, and I chastise myself. Racism is embedded throughout our society. It pervades our society. Focusing on ways that we can help to reduce that racism, even in small ways, gets us a little closer to eliminating racism in our society. I support the Unitarian Universalist Church of Staten Island to adopt the UU 8th principle wholeheartedly to honor Big Stu, who saved my life in Vietnam.
What is beloved community? Beloved community is a phrase promoted by African-American civil rights activist and Christian theologian, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The beloved community is a vision for politics for the earth. It is a future space in which everyone is able to reap the benefits of a wealth that is now reserved for a few. In the beloved community, there is love and abundance. There's no longer the poverty, hunger, homelessness, and strife we experience today. The beloved community is inclusive and all-encompassing. No one will be excluded from the fruits of the beloved community due to race, color, religion, creed, sex, gender expression, or sexual orientation. And all capable persons are responsible for creating it. In the beloved community, our imaginings of a just society will be manifest from our peaceful relationships and deeds. Thank you.
What does it mean to be accountable? In an answer to this question, the UUA website states, white UUs hold themselves accountable to communities of color to make sure whites do what they say they will do. In practice, that can mean having a people of color caucus within congregations, districts, etc., to discern and express needs and concerns to the rest of the community. Black UUs hold each other accountable and help each other see and dismantle signs of internalized racism. We need an effective mechanism or structure to ensure this. Similarly, for other oppressions. Additional comments are given on the UU website, including the statement that our existing 7 principles imply the 8th principle, but do not explicitly hold us accountable for addressing these oppressions directly, especially at the systemic level. I'd like to add some of my own thoughts. What does that accountability work look like? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. The 8th principle also includes love. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines the verb love as to hold dear, cherish, and also to thrive in. Synonyms of the verb love include appreciate, cherish, prize, treasure, and value. I believe love is tied to trust, promise, as in obligation, and engagement. In regard to the beloved community, accountability may be the way we create that community, as well as the way we promote it and make it thrive. Accountability is often used as an organizational management process. It includes identifying a desired outcome, educating team members regarding the problem and the desired outcome, identifying the party or parties who will suffer consequences of failure and reap the rewards of success, making and implementing a plan to achieve the goal with each team member playing their role. Finally, evaluation of the effectiveness of the actions taken thus far and adjusting the plan of action. The plan and roles may change over time as new information is brought to light and as conditions change. I believe this model can be applied to our adoption of the eighth principle. In this case, the dismantling of racism and other oppressions. We are given a goal to journey toward that goal. Our team is the congregation. We as the team, each of us as part of and creators of the beloved community, are accountable to ourselves, our team members, and the beloved community. Change can often start with small actions, one step at a time, one person at a time, educating ourselves, then the team, then others. As the UU website indicates, caucuses may be organized within congregations and regions. This teamwork and interactions are a possibility to bring change in ourselves and the larger community. Activities might include outreach, such as meetings, gatherings in which community members can express their experiences and needs, seminars for communication and education, and/or social events bringing our community together. Our team, our congregation, has the discretion to make a plan based on need and ability. The promise is to journey toward. The steps taken may be small or large at the discretion of our team. This can be achieved one step at a time, and again, may change over time. The eighth principle does not ask us to solve the problem overnight. It asks us to promise to journey toward. I believe this is an honorable and achievable intention for our congregation. Thank you.
The process of affirming the eighth principle at the congregational level is for the congregation to vote on whether to affirm the eighth principle at its end of year congregational meeting. Our meeting is usually held in the beginning of June. Over 140 congregations out of roughly 1,400 congregations in the UUA have affirmed the principle already and are hard at work developing beloved community, presumably, and holding themselves accountable to their plans. If our congregation votes to affirm the eighth principle, and I hope it does, we can then hold services and workshops, as Bonnie was saying, to educate ourselves on how to implement the principle step by step at the personal, congregational, community, borough, city, state, region, or national level with other groups, including other faith groups and with other UUA congregations. I know it sounds big because it is big. As Alice Walker once said, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Let's imagine we do have the power to become anti-racist and to dismantle racist systems in the UUA and in our world. And so ends our presentation today on the eighth principle. It's now time for our closing hymn, which is When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Please join me now in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Virginia Allen will now deliver the closing words by UUA Minister Rebecca Savage.
Don't forget to
Spirit of life, Spirit of love, we have gathered under the banner of a shared faith. We are born of a welcoming grace that extends and receives love. We are touched by the ways we have fallen short of who we strive to be. And here we are reborn, forged by a greater courage. Let us move from this place, encouraged and refreshed for the journey ahead.
Thank you to all those who participated in today's service, and to Carolyn and Kevin Clark for the beautiful music and singing. We will now move to an informal discussion on Zoom.